We're good to go?
Always good to go.
Page Daled.
Daled.
Page 4.
Amud.
You know, there's these people out there who make snide comments that have a lot of books. So I guess this class proves I don't put the books for show. If I use the books, I have them. If I don't have the books, if I don't need the books, I don't have them. It's very simple.
You mean other people from online make the comments, or just me?
No, people online.
Remember, I made a comment that.
Did you?
And I said, "Did you actually read them all?" But actually, by the end, I realized, yes, you did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I still have a problem that I carried forward from last week. Was the Itztaba.
Well, we're going to be learning about the
With-
Itztaba.
Was
So,
that platform going against a back wall, yet covering only part of it, only part of the sukkah. So if you've got something that's about yay wide and just enough to sit on it, and the sukkah is from here all the way to him, okay, does that render the sukkah kosher? How about over here and over here and over here? Everybody who's there, is it kosher?
we're going to discuss this later. So, what's Ami's bothered with, I think we should start the class. People are here. We're talking about a sukkah which is too tall. It's 20 amas high. And because it's 20 amas high, the schach is far away, not visible, or maybe the structure is intrinsically non-temporary by virtue of its size. For whatever reason, we discussed this earlier in the Gemara, different reasons as to why a sukkah might be too tall, why the halacha requires a sukkah to be somewhat lower than a very tall building. But at any rate, once it goes past 20 amot, it's no longer a kosher sukkah. That's the sukkah we're in now. And we're trying to make the sukkah kosher. What do we do? So one of the things that we realized is we could kind of build up the floor. And if we create a platform or a higher floor, then the sukkah will become kosher because the schach will not be 20 amos higher anymore. And in last week's class, we learned about this itztaba, which is a platform. And the itztaba filled the back half or third of the sukkah.
How about if it filled up 1/10 of the sukkah?
I know what you're getting at. So let me just, for all of the benefit of our viewers, let me tell everybody what we're talking about. I'll tell everybody what's bothering you, and I'll defer it for when we get to the Gemara that actually discusses this. So let's say that this Gemara here, let's say that's the sukkah. This is the size of the sukkah, okay? So for argument's sake, I'm sitting here on the north. This is the east, this is the west, and this would be the south. So let us imagine we have a fine wall on the south, a fine wall here on either side, on the east and west. The north is open. The problem is that these fine walls are so fine or so tall, they're 20 amot high. Okay, so the schach is way, way, way up there, and as such, the people in the sukkah are not fulfilling the mitzvah. So we say, well, 1 minute, we can build up a platform. If we can elevate this floor, then when you're on this floor, you're no longer 20 amot away from the schach. And we have discussed in previous classes, it's important, right, to realize this is a continuum. Each class builds on what we learned in the previous week. We talked about this idea of the schach sort of becoming a sukkah suddenly. It's without placing the schach. In Hebrew, ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asa, you had to make the sukkah, not simply uncover or somehow make the sukkah magically appear. And we talked about the notion that the schach is kosher schach. It is kosher schach. It's just it's too far away. So the sukkah, in principle, is kosher. The problem is I'm too far away from it. Now I have to become a little closer to it. So I build up this platform. So we said last week that if I were to fill, and this for argument's sake, the back half of this sukkah with a platform, so I build up a platform, the back half has a platform, then the schach is no longer 20 amot high, and Rashi went on to tell us that because the sukkah is kosher, because I have a wall on the west and a wall on the east and a wall on the south, even the area in the front, which is not really in the proper distance from the roof, it's further away from the roof than it should be, would still be a kosher sukkah. Yes, I think everybody remembers this? Yeah, okay. So now the Gemara is going to give us an even more complex case. Continuing right in the middle, smack in the middle of Daf Daled, you actually have some little pictures, some diagrams in the Gemara, which is kind of unusual. And it's It's really good they're there because it helps us understand what's going on. So the Gemara continues now and says like this. We talked about Hoisa Gavaya Me'eser Mama. This is just before the diagrams, lines get a little narrower. It was 20 amot high. Ubanaba Itzdaba. You built a platform along the back wall, the middle wall, which we talked, in our case, the south wall, al pnei kula, along the entire area, the yesh ba hechsher sukkah, and now it has what we call hechsher sukkah. The sukkah is kosher, what allows for it to be a kosher sukkah, and because it has what it takes for it to be a kosher sukkah, so we have a sukkah ksheira. Sukkah is kosher. Now the Gemara continues, and with this we'll pick up this week's class. Umin hatzad. What if you build a platform along one side? So the platform now is occupying a space along the south wall, which is here. It occupies significant coverage along the west wall. You'll remember that the north wall is open, so there is no wall. So the Gemara says, now we have to see how far it is from the edge of the platform to the east wall. Im yesh misfas itztaba lekoisel dalad amos. If from the east wall to where the platform begins, there's 4 amot, which is approximately 6 feet. So in that case, psula. This would be a non-kosher sukkah. However, pachos me'arba, less than 4, ksheira. It's kosher. So let me explain a little bit. A sukkah, principally speaking, needs to have 3 walls. Principally speaking. The 4th wall is not necessary, but 3 walls it has to have. Yes, we can creatively deal with 2.5 walls, because then there's a little bit of a wall which kind of can, along with a doorway, can become creatively the 3rd wall. But really you need 3 walls. It's just that sometimes when you have 2 walls, a part of a wall could serve as a 3rd wall. But you need 3 walls. In this case, when the
here is not having 3 walls.
Very good. Very well, yes. So the problem here is, the platform is the problem, because without a platform we don't have a sukkah because it's 20 amot high. But now that we've built the platform, so we've elevated the floor, so we should be close to the schach. The problem is that the platform only has 2 walls. It has a wall along the south side. It has a wall along the west side. The north side is open. 2 walls, my dear friends, do not make a sukkah. 2 walls are not a sukkah. So the Gemara told us it really depends on the distance between the platform and the wall. So if this is the south wall, and this is the west wall, and here I have an east wall, I built the platform up on this side. The question is, how much space is here? If it's 4 amot or more, it's not a kosher sukkah. But if it's just 4 amot or less, it is a kosher sukkah. Now, of course, you might well ask the question, what is going on here? What do you mean it's 4 amot or more? Or 4? What does 4 amot have to do? We still don't have an eastern wall. So the Gemara says, my kamashmalan, what's being taught? What is this? Let us hear, which is a euphemism in the Gemara. Like, what do we hear from this? Meaning, what does it teach us? The amrinan that we say, doifen akuma. Now, the words my kamashmalan, I read them as almost kind of placidly. And then we come with the Tanina. But the truth is, really, my kamashmalan is a question. But I read it more of a matter of factly, only because I wanted to introduce this idea. So this is how it goes. We have a Gemara later on. And because we have this Gemara later on, that's exactly why the Gemara here is perturbed with this Mishnah. Like, what is this Brisa teaching us? Like, we know this from another place. But there's this idea within the Sukkah called dofen akuma. Dofen in Hebrew means a wall. Akum means crooked, bent wall. So we have a principle called the bent wall. And this is how it goes. Suppose I have a sukkah. Let's say this is my wall of my sukkah. The wall of my sukkah. And the schach starts like around here. So is this wall counted as a wall? Because the schach doesn't begin. So the halacha is that as long as I fill this space with whatever I might fill it, whether it's schach or non-schach, but as long as the space is filled, it becomes a bent wall, which means the wall goes vertically, and then the wall gives a turn, and it moves along horizontally.
So the top is actually part of the wall.
So the top is actually part of the wall. Well, there's two versions of how we understand this. According to one version, the top is actually part of the wall. So that's the meaning of doifen akuma. Do you understand? Now, we have a very large sukkah here with a lot of schach on top. There was no problem, no shortage of schach. The problem was just too far away. So it turns out that if it's less than 4 amot, less than 6 feet, we can consider the wall bent. So we could say this tall wall that's 20 amot high actually turns and now moves in 6 amot, and by default, kind of in an imaginary fashion, completes the wall. So the platform, because we have a wall can be as high as it has to be. The wall is not relevant for us. But the wall goes now on a slant, or goes crooked, so to speak. It bends. Because the wall bends, so it turns out that my sukkah is now a kosher sukkah. My east wall becomes a wall, creatively, with the idea of the bent wall. You follow? Makes sense? Do you have any questions about this?
I follow, but it doesn't make sense.
Okay. So,
I get the analogy. The issue is that the top part is now really a roof, and looking at it, the walls don't go horizontal.
okay, so let me help you understand this a little bit. And then let me tell you that you may be right. It doesn't necessarily make sense from a perspective of physics or architecture, but it makes sense in halacha. And here, that's good enough for us. Suppose, if you will, you had walls that were on a slant, like this. And the walls came up to a point like this, okay, this high, and you put schach on top here. Do you doubt that would be a kosher sukkah?
No.
But the walls are kind of bent, you know?
The walls are leaning, not bent, but
So now we're getting into semantics. Now it's the leaning walls. There are homes in which the third floor is really only a half a floor because they're using the space above the trellises. It's basically an attic. So what happens in houses like this is that a tall person has difficulty sleeping in those rooms because the roof is the wall. And usually there comes to some area in the middle which is tall enough. Typically children sleep in these rooms who are 3.5 or 4 feet tall, and they have no problem getting into their beds, whereas an adult would have difficulty because the walls are a little short. It's actually the roof, it's not the wall. But for all practical purposes, it becomes a bent wall. So it's not entirely beyond the pale of imagination to say that you could have a bent wall. I mean, here it gets really imaginative because the wall isn't on an angle. The wall is straight, and then it's actually the roof. But halachically, we see this. We introduce the concept of doifen akuma. Now, you tell me it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to argue that because this is halacha l'Moshe Messinai. This is a tradition that came directly from God, that in halacha, the sukkah wall can be considered doifen akuma. It can be a bent wall.
why
So I want to
instead
give
of
you.
that, didn't they say that it's a thicker wall rather than a?
No,
than a
there's
bent
no
wall?
there's no instead of that. Why didn't they say? Halacha l'Moshe Messinai means this is what God told Moses at Sinai. Remember that story with 40 days and 40 nights, no coffee breaks? What do you think he was doing? He was absorbing the essence of all the wisdom of the Torah. And one of the ideas communicated to Moshe Rabbeinu during one of those 40-day experiences on the mountain was the idea of doifen akuma. Another was that your tefillin have to be black and square. And one could easily say, well, I don't understand that. Why do they have to be black? Maybe tefillin should be blue. It would be much nicer, blue tefillin. Or maybe yellow tefillin, to be more visible. Red tefillin, that looks bloody. Okay, we'll do yellow tefillin, you know. A lot of fire trucks were going yellow in the 80s. High visibility. It says, V'ro chal ha'aretz. The nations of the world should see. Yellow tefillin. Let's introduce yellow neon tefillin, and this way everybody could see from far away.
And a music box inside.
A music box inside too. Oh, now we're getting creative. And this makes a lot of sense. Maybe. But it's not what God wants. So halacha l'Moshe Messina means this is what God told us to Moshe. What the sages do discuss is what is the jurisprudence of this. Exactly how does it work? So let's take a look in Rashi and see what Rashi says now. This is important actually. And this will make a difference. Rashi says in the bottom of the page, Pachos me'arba ames ksheda, less than 4 ames is kosher. Rashi says, Shedoifnei habayis nasen la defanis. Because the walls of the home are going to become the walls. Vahatikra psula hamafsekes benatayim, and the non-kosher roof, which separates between the walls and the schach, because imagine you had a hole made in the roof. And now you're going to put the schach on a hole in the roof. Could you do that? Can a person have a roof that opens in the middle of his house and put schach on top?
Yes.
Who says?
I had one.
You had one. It would depend how far it is from the wall. If it's 6 amas from the wall, it's called doifen akuma. It's kosher. If it's more than 6 amas, it's a problem. So what would you have to do? You'd have to have the roof that go like this. It'd have to actually be on a slant. Because otherwise there's an issue.
So we're right back to where I was.
Yeah, but the roof on the slant doesn't require creative Torah ideas or halacha l'Moshe Messina. That's easy to understand. The doifen akuma is not simple at all, right? So if you had a doifen akuma, if it was kosher, it would have to be less than 6 feet from the wall, and then it could be kosher. So listen to what Rashi says. He describes the mechanics of how this works. He says, Tikra psula, we have a non-kosher roof, because it's a really good roof. Hamafsekes, which is making a difference. Royin oisa, we see the roof, ki'ilu hi min hadoifen, as if the roof is an extension of the wall, as if the wall had gone up, v'ne'akam hadoifen adkan. It's as if the wall had gone up, and then the wall had bent. So that's how we look at it. And therefore, the einkan schach posel, we don't see schach or foliage which is not kosher. Ella, what do we see? We see doifen. We see a wall. Umechuber l'schach kosher. That's connected to the kosher schach. So this is the first way we're going to understand the mechanics, the jurisprudence of how the halacha l'Moshe Messina works. That doifen akuma is to be taken quite literally. That we imagine in our mind's eye as if the wall is going up, and then the wall turned and went this way. Simple as that. Here's your wall turns. It's one long wall. Well, if your wall turns, why can't it turn for 100 feet? Well, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. It can be 6 feet. That's what it can be. Less than 2 meters. Or 2 meters. That's it. Once you get 2 meters, that's how far a wall can bend, halachically. Once you go past that, no, halachic walls don't bend that far. They bend to a degree.
Well, in that case, if your sukkah then is 12 amot wide, and you have an open space of 4 amot on one side, an open space of 4 amot on the other side.
If you're listening to my words carefully, you'll remember that I said that there is substance covering the roof. I did not say open space. Because the doifen, the wall, is not imaginary. There really is something there. There is a barrier. Only the question is this substance, whatever the matter is the matter vertical or horizontal? Mm-hmm. But if there's nothing there, you cannot say doifen akuma because there's nothing there. You understand? Mm-hmm. There has to actually be something there, whether it's schach or roof or canvas, tarp, whatever. It's got to be something. Otherwise, the wall can't just turn when there's no wall there. Here, the chiddush, the novelty here is that the wall has turned. There has to be a wall.
Okay, so let me rephrase then. There is a tarp. 4 here, 4 here, and the schach in the middle 4.
That's correct.
We have a sukkah.
Yeah. Absolutely. You can have we're going to learn that in the next case. That the dofen akuma can be on more than one side. But the answer would be yes. So let me tell you that what Rashi says here, and Rashi says something similar a little bit later on when he talks about dofen akuma, and many of the Rishonim follow Rashi's understanding of this, and in their commentary they describe the mechanics of the dofen akuma in like fashion. The great Rishon, Rabbeinu Nissen, comments and he says that as such, it would be prohibited to eat in the area of the dofen akuma. So this was bothering you. That here we took a sukkah, we built a platform in the back half, and there's 3 walls because it's the whole platform. And we said you can eat even in the part of the sukkah that, well, it really isn't a kosher sukkah. Why? Because once it's a kosher sukkah, it expands. But the Ran says, if you only built a platform on this half, assuming that this was only 6 feet, it could still be a kosher sukkah here, but here would not be a kosher sukkah. Do you know why? Says Rabbeinu Nissen, because you're sitting under the roof, under the wall, not the roof.
Oh, we're back to the wall.
Schach is a roof, not a wall. So because you're sitting, now it's a dofen akuma, he says if you're sitting under a dofen, you're not sitting in a sukkah. Here in the front area, which is higher than 20 amot, you are sitting on the schach. You are sitting in a sukkah. You're sitting in a sukkah. A sukkah means an enclosure with schach on top. Whereas when the platform is only on half of the sukkah, and we have a dofen akuma that allows for it to be a kosher sukkah, a bent wall, which means the wall goes up and bends, sitting here, spending time here in the sukkah is essentially spending time under the wall. Remember, it's a bent wall. You're spending time under the wall. As such, you don't fulfill the mitzvah. That follows the way Rashi explains the mechanics here. However, Rashi later on page 17, which is where we're going to get into the subject of dofen akuma in detail, Rashi explains it in a little bit different way. He says that the schach in between the wall and the rest of the schach becomes a bridge. He doesn't call the schach an actual wall. He says dofen akuma means it's as if the wall stopped here and picks up here. And because there's a bridge, we make believe that the wall actually makes it there. It's like it grants the wall an extension. So it's not, dofen akuma doesn't mean that the wall actually bent or that this is the wall, but rather this reality allows for an extension. The wall that's here should be connected to the schach over here. What's the difference? Says Rabbeinu Nissen, the difference is that from that perspective, I would be allowed to eat over here in this side of the sukkah. And the reason would be, now it's a kosher sukkah. Once it's a kosher sukkah, the kosher sukkah spreads throughout the entire enclosure. It is true that now I'm sitting in an area where the schach is 20 amot higher, so it shouldn't be a kosher sukkah, but once the platform was built here, and once it became a kosher sukkah, I am sitting under the schach. This became a kosher sukkah because of the mechanism of dofen akuma, which means, according to the second version, that we link the wall from here to here. There's a bridge that links the wall, almost an imaginary creative leap. But once we creatively link the wall to the schach, you're still sitting on the schach.
Let's stick a tree at the end over here now.
No.
Okay?
If you stick a tree, it's not a kosher sukkah. Then it's definitely not a kosher sukkah.
No, but I'm going by the same analogy.
No.
Okay?
Cannot be a living
Or let's take it. The wall started off as a building's wall,
Yeah.
against the building's
Okay,
wall.
yeah.
Okay? And there's a terrace
Yeah.
sticking out of
Yeah.
the wall.
Yeah. So it could be the terrace
The
sticking
terrace,
out could
and
be
then you
a
have the schach starting from
that
the
could be a
terrace onwards.
that could be a dofen
and you're
akuma.
under the terrace.
No. So under the terrace, you're definitely under a wall, not under schach.
Well, you were under the wall when you put a tarp.
No, here you have schach. The question is, when you had schach that was 20 amot higher, does the schach become wall, or does the schach bridge this wall to the kosher schach? That's the question.
So
That's
the focus is on the schach.
The focus on what does the schach become? The non-kosher schach, what does it become? Certainly, if you would have actual terrace or porch, that would for sure be a dofen akuma. Here, the question is here specifically. In this case, when we're not dealing with an actual wall, but rather schach, does the schach maintain its entity or identity as schach, or does it now become wall? This is the question. And as I said, there's two versions, there's two ways of explaining the mechanics of how Dofen Akuma works here, and there would be a difference in halacha. Now let's go back to the Gemara. So the Gemara now really is not saying my kamashmalan. The Gemara is now asking a question. So the Gemara says, 1 second, my kamashmalan. What exactly are you coming to tell me here? Like, what is the novelty? What have you discovered? The assumption always is that if there is a Mishnah or a Braisa, that it's coming to tell me something I would not know otherwise. We do not have multiple Mishnayos which replicate each other. Meaning the Mishnayos might look the same, they might smell the same and taste the same, but they're actually different. Why? Because there's a nuance being conveyed that we were unaware of before. We never repeat ourselves. If there seems to be repetition, one of two things is possible. Either we don't understand the Mishnah, because it seems the Mishnah is a repetition, or the Mishnah is not a Mishnah. There's only one of two options. If it's a Mishnah, it has to be conveying something to us. This is implicit. The implicit understanding or the implicit principle in place when it comes to analyzing a Mishnah. You see, you have to understand the personality of the Gemara, and you have to know the variables and the principles the Gemara works with. The Gemara works with the principle of holding the Mishnah in the highest of esteem. The Mishnah is absolute. It's not a question. The Mishnahs aren't wrong. Mishnayos are always perfect. We are the problem. We don't understand the Mishnah. If I ask a question, if the Mishnah seems problematic, I must ask the question. Because if the Mishnah seems problematic, I'm not understanding the Mishnah. And when I'll understand the Mishnah right, it won't be problematic anymore. So what's the only way to figure out why it's not a problem? I have to clearly adjust my understanding. My present understanding allows for duplication, replication, or something else that a Mishnah can't be. So I have to ask the question, hey, something's wrong here. According to my understanding, this Mishnah is a replication. And the Gemara will have to come back and say, no, you didn't understand. There's a nuance you were missing here. So this is why the Gemara comes along and thunders, my kamashmalan, what did you tell me here? What are we just repeating stories? What did Baba Mises? We tell one story, tell another story. The Gemara doesn't just talk about narratives and give us, here's an example. You want another? Here's another example. If the Gemara Mishnah gives us two examples, it's because each example conveys something, however nuanced, but something that the other example might not have conveyed or from which we would not have known. So the Gemara says, "My kamashmala, what are you teaching me? The amrina doifen akuma, that we have this principle halacha l'Moshe Sinai that walls can bend. We know that. Tanina, we learned that in a Mishnah. We know that already. And we learned it in a Mishnah later, which appears in page 17 in our version of Masechet Sukkah, that it says, Bayit shenifchas, a home whose roof had collapsed. The roof collapsed. The roof is open to the elements now. So the person said, why should I fetch a complaint that my roof collapsed? This is a gift. Hashem wanted me to have an easy time making a sukkah. So what did he do? V'sichach al gabav. So he immediately went and obtained kosher foliage, and he made himself a sukkah. No brainer. The roof collapsed. Perfect. Just in time for sukkahs. I'm not going to fix the roof now, he says. I'll fix the roof after sukkahs. So we say, there in Daf Yud Zayin, Im yesh min ha'kaisel l'sikuch dalad ames. If there's from the wall of the house, the wall here and a wall here, if there's from the wall to where the roof caved in, 4 amot of actual roof that survived, so in that case, what will be the halacha? Psula. It's not kosher. Why? Because walls don't bend more than 6 feet. A wall can bend, but 6 feet, that's all. After that, it's ridiculous. Hapachas mikan. What if it be less than dalad amas? Because the Gemara the Mishnah doesn't come along and say, a roof collapsed and you put schach? That's not a sukkah. That's a house with schach. No, Mishnah didn't say that. Mishnah says, 4 amas? If there's 4 amot, if there's 6 feet from the wall to the area that's open, that's when we could say it's not kosher. Hapachas mikan. if I analyze this carefully, I say, so if it will be less than 6 amot, ksheira, then it's kosher. So I know the halacha of Dofen Akuma. I know it from a Mishnah that speaks about the roof that collapsed. So if I know it from a Mishnah that the roof collapsed, which is the official Mishnah of Dofen Akuma, why do I have this Mishnah, which is talking about a sukkah that's too high, a platform being built, and a space between the platform and the wall? I should have been able to figure that out from the other Mishnah. And the Mishnah will never repeat itself. So if there's a new situation that arises, I'm supposed to go back and look at the literature we have and figure out what the answer is. In fact, that's what we do today. We have new circumstances. We have an evolving and changing world, and the Torah is absolute. What do? We go back to the Torah, we analyze similar situations, and we try to come to a resolution, to figure out an answer. So Mahu de Tema, the Gemara comes along and says, I will tell you. I will explain to you why it's not so simple. What might I have thought? Hasam hu dechazya l'dofen. Over there, it actually could have been a wall. Because roof, wall, they're all waterproof. It's actually a wall. It actually provides protection. So really and truly, why can't walls bend? Why can't walls bend? Well, why not? I suppose walls could bend.
Mm-hmm. That's how they become bent walls.
That's how they become bent walls, when they bend. Like, think of it this way. Imagine if you had, like an architectural feature where you'd have a wall that kind of went in and indented. So in today's day and age, especially in a country like Canada, they probably would actually attach roofing material, because anything where the precipitation sits on constantly is going to start leaking eventually. But in theory, you could have like a wall that goes and then bends in a little and then goes up again. It's not out of the question. Like a wall could bend. So if a wall could bend, what's the issue here? The wall bent. It's actually a wall. It's actually a wall. So therefore, that's why it's chazil l'dofen. It makes sense that it should be considered a wall, because essentially it is the material from which you build a house. Aval hacha, over here I would say, loy chazia l'dofen. It can't be used as a wall. Why can't it be used as a wall? It can't be used as a wall because, number one, it's not the material of a home. It's actually not safe. It doesn't keep the water out. It doesn't keep the wind out. Number one. Number two, it doesn't even serve the purpose of a halachic roof. So you say, okay, you know what? It's a halachic roof. It's not a roof, but it's a halachic roof. So the halachic nature designates it as something of prominence. So say, 1 second. But the halachic roof per se is actually not a roof because it's more than 20 amas. So it's like the sukkah is not there. It's almost like this doesn't exist. Schach, which is higher than 20 amot, is, for all practical purposes, non-extant. So what's on the roof? What's the difference if there's schach on the roof or the roof has nothing? If it's 20 amot high. You know what the difference is? Nothing. Nothing. No difference. In both cases, there is no schach, there is no roof. So in that case, how could this become a dofen? And here, especially if you follow the second interpretation, the one that Rashi uses later on, it becomes even sweeter. Like, it really makes sense, because you're using this schach creatively. You're creating a bridge, like you're bridging a wall and kosher schach, and you make this into a bridge, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist halachically. How could you creatively utilize or harness something and turn it into a halachic reality when al pi halacha it doesn't exist? It wouldn't work. So therefore, I would think in that case, dofen akuma would not be effective here. And that's the chiddush. Ema. So now I would think maybe loy. And the answer to the Gemara is komash malon. This is what it comes to teach me. So now I understand why there is another Mishnah that's talking about a halacha of dofen akuma, because it's not introducing the principle of bent wall, and bent wall is indeed known from somewhere else. What this is teaching is that even though here the roof or schach per se doesn't have an entity, doesn't exist halachically, it's not even a kosher sukkah, Nonetheless, for the purposes of bent wall, for the bent wall syndrome, or bent wall principle or strategy, it would still be effective. That is a big novelty. And if the
Something
Mishnah
that
wouldn't...
doesn't exist, now suddenly exists in order to create something else that didn't exist and now does exist.
Yeah, I mean, you could put it in those terms. You could say something that doesn't exist is now existing.
In order to create something
Well,
from
it's
something that didn't exist.
it's even better because, like, especially according to the second version, something that didn't exist connected something that was extant but was too far away from something else that was extant, and because something that didn't exist connected them both, it suddenly became an existence.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that actually makes perfect sense because when you serve a purpose, then you are. If it serves no purpose, then it doesn't exist.
But the question is existence or serving a purpose? And
What
if it doesn't
what
exist, how can
makes,
how can it serve a purpose?
my dear, what makes something prominent? What gives it existence? The answer is when you serve a purpose. That's so beautiful. That's the point here. The beautiful message here. The beautiful message is as long as you serve a purpose, you are. I am because I serve a purpose. Incidentally, the Mishnah says, Ani lo nivresi. I wasn't created. Ella only l'shamash eskoini. So on a literal level, it just means I was created to serve my master. But if it means I was created to serve my master, meaning God, it should have said, Ani nivresi l'shamash eskoini. I was created to serve my master. So the Rebbe talked about this many times, and he said the Mishnah doesn't say Ani nivresi. Ani lo nivresi. I am not. Not I am. I am not. Elo. You know why I am? I am l'shamash eskoini. So it's to be or not to be. I am or I'm not. The answer is I am if I serve a purpose. And so actually there's a beautiful message that kind of is lifted from the jurisprudence here. I am because I serve a purpose. And therefore we have to ask ourselves, what purpose do we serve? Incidentally, every human being has to intuitively justify his or her existence. We have to justify, if we can't justify our own existence, we can't live. People lose the will to live. So what the Nazis try to do is demoralize the people. And what happened in the camps is people just dropped dead. Except for the people who had a purpose. That's what Viktor Frankl said. He said the people who had a purpose lived. The people who didn't have a purpose didn't live. Why? Because ultimately what gives us life? Purpose. Not biology. Purpose. Does tzchach exist? It exists. It exists if it serves a purpose, it exists. This is the most powerful thing in life is purpose. And that perhaps is an amazing lesson that we can learn from this. So now the Gemara gives us another methodology, another way that this halacha was also stated, with another deeper nuance. We have a sukkah, and the sukkah is larger than 20 amot. Okay. What did you do? You built, in order to minimize the space, the distance between roof to floor, what did you do? Ubana itztaba be'em sa'isa. You built a platform in the middle. So we say, im yesh misvas itztaba. If there is from the edge of the platform, ledoifen, to the walls, arba ames, and to the doifen, to the walls, we would principally be talking about 3 walls, obviously. L'chol ruach, if there's 4 amot away from the south wall, east wall, west wall, north doesn't have a wall, so then we say
to each of the walls.
Correct. If you have 4 amot or more for each of the walls, psula, then it's rendered unfit and disqualified. However, pachas me'arba ames, what if it's less than 4 amot?
At least from one wall.
And no, less than 4 amot from all the walls. Because if it's only one wall, you have how many walls in your sukkah?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
1 wall.
Okay, yeah.
And you need
3.
not 1 wall, not 2 walls, but 3 walls. So therefore, if you have, since this platform does not hug any of the walls, it's in the middle, it's pachas me'arba amas ksheira. So the Gemara says, so Michael Mashmalan, what are you telling us? What are you telling us that is something called Doifen Akuma? Did we not know this is Doifen Akuma? And the answer is, the Amrina and Doifen Akuma, that we say Doifen Akuma. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. That's the chiddush that you're telling me, doifen akuma. It's the hainu hach. It's the same thing. We talked about this before already. We said earlier that here you have a platform. The platform is less than 4 amot away from a wall. So the wall bends, and it completes the wall. And now I have arba ames, less than arba ames. I have a bent wall. What did you tell me now? The platform is in the middle. 4 amot from this wall, 4 amot from the other wall, 4 amot from the third wall. No problem, as long as it's less than 4 amot. Bent walls from all sides.
But
So
in
my
this case,
kamashmala.
it's a bent floor rather than a bent wall.
No, it's bent walls. You don't need the bent floor doesn't do anything to anybody. So by kamashmala, the Gemara asks, so what have you taught me here?
The itztaba is the bottom, right?
That the top of the itztaba, the top of the itztaba,
itztaba is the bottom of the sukkah now.
the top of the
in order to
itztaba,
get- in order
the
to-
top of the platform is the bottom of the sukkah. Yes.
So now you got a bent floor.
No, don't have bent floor because we are trying to get the roof closer. So the only way I can get the roof closer is if this roof, which is on top of the platform, we should have walls. And the only way that the sukkah, the schach on top of this platform is going to be a sukkah is if it has walls. The problem is it has no walls. This platform is wallless. It's a platform without walls. But the answer is it has bent walls. And the bent walls create a wall, as if it's a wall. So the Gemara says, you know what, my kamash milan? Ma'u de tema. What might I have thought? Doifen akuma meruach achasamrinan. You're getting creative. You live on La La Land. You're bending walls that are perfectly straight. You're talking about realities that don't really exist. Oh, one wall you can get away with. One wall, right? Because after all, that third wall can only be a half a wall sometimes also. So the third wall, we use some kind of creative intellectual gymnastics to make an imaginary wall. Okay, fine. Aval kol ruach v'ruach. The whole thing is all imaginary? The whole thing doesn't exist? The whole thing requires creativity? I mean, that's already too much. We would say loy. That's too much already. Third wall, yes. It's not the only halacha of a third wall. We have wall 1, wall 2, and a half a wall. That becomes a third wall. So we already have the idea of the creative, if you want to call it imaginary, or you want to call it conceptual, theoretical wall, although it's not tangible or dense. I can't actually touch it or see it or feel it, but I can conceptually imagine it to be a wall. One wall to finalize a sukkah, fine. You might have thought that. But here, the entire sukkah is based on a conceptual reality. The whole thing is conceptual. There are actually no walls here. You would be sitting in a sukkah without walls. Well, there are walls, but they're a little bit of distance away. And the problem is that once we leave our little platform, we have more than 20 amot from floor to ceiling. So there are no walls here. And the chiddush is that despite the fact there are no actual walls, that the conceptual idea of the bent wall would work to create a sukkah. Not to complete a sukkah, but to create a sukkah. It's not about a quantity thing of 1 wall or 3 walls. In the first instance, the bent wall creativity completes the electromagnet. It completes the sukkah. It's like you had a sukkah, we were almost there, we needed a little bit creativity to get there, to finish it. Here it's all made of ether. The whole thing is conceptual. From beginning to end, there are actually no walls here. And what are we being taught? That conceptual reality is reality. If Torah says it's real, it's real. If Torah says the walls are bent, the walls are bent. You don't see it that way? Well, that doesn't matter what we see. The question is how Torah sees it. And if Torah says a reality is a certain way, it is that way. Even if the entirety of what we discuss here, not in detail, the whole thing is conceptual. The chiddush here is, nonetheless, it still works. And this is even more profound if we follow the second opinion, which, by the way, the second opinion is also found in the Das of Rabbeinu Nissim Gaon, and quoted by the Magid Mishnah, B'Shem HaGoinim. The Goinim come before the Rishonim. So the Goinim is the first generation after the Rabbanan Savaroi, after the Talmud is completed, then come the Goinim, and the Shitas HaGoinim was that it's not just that Doifen Akuma means it actually bends and becomes a wall. No. It bridges. The wall that's less than 4 amot and the schach get bridged. It's as if the wall there's some kind of interregnum and the wall picks up later. The whole thing is not only conceptual that a wall bent, it's conceptual because the bent wall means literally have a leap, a bridge. But despite the fact that it's being bridged and the whole thing is conceptual, nonetheless, that concept is real. And it actually creates a kosher sukkah for us to sit in.
Therefore, virtual reality is actual reality as long as it serves a purpose.
And it's
I
in the
didn't
Torah.
say that. You're right, exactly. Virtual reality is not reality unless Torah says it's reality. So let's rephrase that. The Torah's conceptual reality is a concrete reality. There's a beautiful story told. It's not exactly the same, but I want to share the story with you nonetheless. There's a Yerushalmi that says on the pasuk, "Lakel goymer olai," God who finishes off based on me. He finishes things based on what does that mean? Based on me. So there's this notion. The Yerushalmi says that if halacha is ruled a certain way, the halacha actually becomes the reality in the physical material world because the halacha becomes that way. Lakel goymer olai. So one example of this is that's a famous story that the man was suffering with tuberculosis, and he has this very vivid dream, and his father comes to him from Gan Eden and says, "You must move to Israel immediately." He's like, "Okay, yeah, sure. I must have eaten too much kishka before I went to sleep." And then he has a recurring dream, and his father keeps coming to him, and he's finding in the dream. So why do I have to move to Israel? He says, because there's a machlekes, there's a dispute between the Bet Yosef and between the Ramah, the author of the Sephardic Shulchan Aruch and the Ashkenazi Shulchan Aruch, of an animal with this kind of condition could live a year or not. The Ramah says he can't. The Ramah says it's a treifa. The Beis Yosef paskins that it could live. He says, therefore, since the halacha in Poland is like the Ramah, if you're going to stay here, you will die. But he says, if you go to Tzfat, where the Beis Yosef is the Rav, then you will live. See, this is an example of this. The Rebbe shared a story that the Rogatchover Goren, even though he was a Rav in a place called Dvinsk for most of his adult life, but there's a time much later on in life, after the Bolshevik Revolution, that he lived in Moscow. And he had a nephew who was a very bright fellow. And he lived with this nephew. He didn't have any children. He lived with this nephew. So one day the Bolsheviks were just, figuring out how to govern while killing everybody they wanted in the middle. And they would, you have to put taxation, So he got a tax bill. So he reviewed the tax bill. And he said to his nephew, this tax, I'm, according to halacha, obligated to pay. This tax, he said, according to halacha, I'm not obligated to pay. I'm not paying it. The nephew said, uncle, you can't mess around with the Bolsheviks. And like, you get a tax bill. He said, no, according to Allah, I'm not obligated to pay. A few days later, they get a new notice in the mail. We reviewed your file. You're only obligated to pay the first tax. And the Rebbe maintained that this is an example of Lakel Gomer Olai. The Rogatchover go and paskin the halacha. When he paskin the halacha, God says, I'll finish that off. It actually creates reality. And this is the difference between what the world calls virtual reality, perception is reality. This is total reality. If the halacha says it, it is. If the halacha says it isn't, it isn't. And whatever we see or don't see is actually irrelevant. We follow the reality of Torah. If Torah says it's a bent wall, if Torah says it's a wall, not a roof, then it's a wall. And the reality of a sukkah becomes a sukkah. Especially because we speak not even about the material reality, which we need to have this enormous amount of faith in Lakel Gomer Olai. Here we speak about a halacha reality. The halacha reality. So what's real according to halacha? Halachic principles. And the halachic principles say that this concept works in halacha. So if it works in halacha, it's good enough. It even works in the real world because the halacha is so. Allah is kama v'kama, that it creates the halachic reality. And so we don't have a literal or actual bent wall, but we have a halachic principle called Dofen Akuma, and that is sufficient. And so the novelty here, and Daf Daled, and these Mishnayos is number one, that schach can become a Dofen, even if it's lechazi, even if it doesn't even exist as schach, because it's 20 amas higher, especially according to the second opinion, it's only bridging, but it serves a purpose. And the bigger chiddush is that it not only completes a sukkah, but it can even build an entire sukkah. That's how real it is. That's how true it is. That's how profound and powerful it is. And with this, we conclude the discussions of a sukkah that's too tall. And now we're going to talk about what happens when a sukkah is too short.
But still, that leaves the question of how large must that
I know the question that you asked. Stick with the program. When we get to the halacha of Dofen Akuma and sukkah she'enik that becomes kosher by virtue, then we'll talk more about this in Mitzvah. That will be the sugya for it. And with this, we shall conclude for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good lesson.